There is a time to ponder and there's a time to act. There's a time to be light-hearted and there's a time to be serious. There's a time to gather, there's a time to release. And that's what we're taking into focus on the program Weekend Deal. We have been gathering enthusiastic responses nationwide, and we began yesterday when we opened up with the topic, the state of primary and secondary education in Nigeria, where we listen, the information, the analysis, the knowledge, the enlightenment, the education, and our focus continues to be the state of primary and secondary education in Nigeria. Our background feature will set the tone for our conversation.
It is a common knowledge that education is an effective tool for a nation to attain greater heights in its quest for technical know-how and subsequent advancement. However, Nigeria's educational curriculum is in dire need of innovation, as the curriculum currently in use by various institutions was designed about 50 years ago, thus making it inadequate to meet the present-day needs of employers of labor.
We've been able to do a lot in the area of curriculum. For instance, we introduced what we call integrated learning, where we borrow a lot of curriculum from other developed world and we incorporated it and we are making use of it. But however, I think the present curriculum we are using, it needs to be worked on because actually it's not meeting the present challenge.
Education is said to be the bedrock of development, but education in Nigeria is confronted with several challenges. These include poor funding, poor educational infrastructures, inadequate classrooms, teaching aids, and paucity of quality teachers.
We interview teachers. At times when they present their certificate, very wonderful certificates. In fact, you would, if you can employ them on proxy, based on what they present to you, you assume that they are very wonderful. But on a closer look, by the time you bring them close to you and you pass them through certain processes, discover that they are not what they think they are. Generally, the quality of our teachers, we need to do some work on it. There are a lot of factors that contributed to that. If I am good and you don't take care of me as a teacher, of course, you don't expect the best from me. If when the month ends, I'm not paid, when the money is not commensurate to the services I'm rendering, and what's supposed to take me is not taking me home, at times it affects the motivation of teachers, and there is no how they will give in their best.
To further strengthen the quality of education in Nigeria, the federal government has approved a new national language policy, which makes mother tongue a compulsory medium of instruction for public primary school pupils.
In as much as I believe that is a very good policy for the nation, I think it's equally very important for the two of them to go together. Our official language is English. So are we now telling me that we are going to wait until they enter JSS1 before we now introduce English to them? We should sit down and look at it critically and bring in the languages if we can do it, because not every language in Nigeria or not every tribe in Nigeria have developed enough to be able to, put it into education.
Though the reintroduction of history into the curriculum of primary and secondary schools across the country in 2019 by the federal government received commendation from many. The decision was not just born out of the need to restore the subject in schools, but in recognition of its contribution to the social-political, economic and cultural development of Nigeria.
When it was expunged from the education system, we are not really too happy about it because I should know where I come from. So the reintroduction of history into our education, I think, is commendable. And I hope and pray that government will sit up and get adequate teachers who are well trained and versed, so that they will be able to communicate history properly, so that the history we're talking about, it will not be corroded.
Another issue begging for answer in the education sector is what has happened to the once enviable education inspectorate?
In those days, they used to inform us ahead that we are coming. But nowadays, you can just be in the school as early as 8 a.m., 7 a.m., they are in your school. So they can catch us either doing it right or doing it wrong. Anytime they come, what they do majorly now is advisory, they advise. And once they discover that it's beyond them, then they take action. So the quality of inspection in school, I wouldn't say is not meeting up. They are still doing their best. Probably they may have their challenges, which I don't know, but they still come to our schools.
Alumni associations have roles to play in the revitalization of the education sector, as they represent a bridge between the past and the future. Also, in most societies, many educational institutions owe their survival and development to the vibrancy and enthusiasm of their alumni associations. The need for collaboration among stakeholders in addressing the falling standard of education in Nigeria cannot be overstated. Therefore, our focus on Weekend Deal today will be on state of education in Nigeria, primary and secondary.
You are watching Weekend Deal. We're talking about the state of primary and secondary education in Nigeria. Our conversation began yesterday. We talked about private schools, and from Lagos, someone says there's a proliferation of private schools. But we also got to learn that the private schools are a necessary support system. We continue that conversation as we talk with Ambassador Charles Omekwe. He is the former National Vice President of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools. He's a proprietor himself of the High Grade International School, Mararaba. Great to have you on Weekend Deal.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
You are a front runner for quality education, and for that we acknowledge you. Oftentimes you have spoken with us about necessary steps that you take to ensure that our children under your care get quality education. Let us even start with quality education. When we say quality education at the primary and secondary level, what exactly should we take into cognizance?
Well, when you say quality education, what we must take into cognizance is the content, the curriculum that you are giving, the totality of the learning task and the experience that you are giving to the children who wants to know how beneficial it is the content addressing their immediate need as young people? Does it provide solution to problems within their environment and enlighten them on the values required of them as children that are growing to take over from us? So that you talk about the values, you talk about issues that affect our well-being, how we can foster good understanding and knowledge of our culture, respect, belief, tradition, and move forward, acquire skills that will enable us sustain ourselves within the environment we find ourselves.
There have been incidents, quite unfortunate in some cases. We know that in Lagos, it was a commonplace thing one time for you to see women in traffic holding babies. So they are twins, that they are homeless, they are widows. We later got to hear that sometimes these women have an alliance with people that work in daycare centers or crèches where they go pick these children from and use them to hang around on streets in Lagos. Very pathetic. That doesn't happen in all cases. But what ought mothers to look out for when they are taking their young, precious children to daycare at such an early age?
Well, I want to say that it's not a very good approach for you at that very tender age to deny the child of the parental care that is necessary for the child to grow in love of parents and understand how to gradually begin to appreciate society. Education is a veritable tool for national development.
So we say.
And it is a collective responsibility of all to ensure that we give our children good care, good education. And it starts from the cradle. When you deny these little kids of parental care, parental guidance, and, allow them to know you and understand what you do and how you do it, so that if by the time you are taking them to daycare or taking them to anywhere, you understand they are happy because they know you have been with them.
Grown to a level that they're independent.
Of course. But for you to leave a child,
3 months is too young.
Well, too young.
4 months, okay.
Please, I want us to be realistic in whatever we're doing as far as education
But
is
I'm
concerned.
telling you what is existing.
That is what
So
is.
4 months is not good enough? 1 year?
How many months is government giving as a maternity leave?
4 months.
4 months? Well, if you have a daycare or a crèche where you can keep the child and
Nearby.
they will take care nearby.
Go and breastfeed.
Of course.
We did that.
Of course.
We did that.
So, but the point now is that with this kind of attitude, parents have decided to leave their children just under the care of the nanny for as long as they dismiss from work.
But see, one way it can be done, or what I used to do, or I know some mothers also do, a nanny goes with the child to the crèche, and you get a crèche near where you work, so
Yes.
that you go intermittently during the day, you go and nurse your baby, who is being fed alongside other nutrients. And then, when you're a nursing mother, you tend to close from work early. So you close maybe about 2 o'clock, some 3, some 4. But what we're asking is, where it becomes necessary, and some mothers may feel there's no other option, what ought one to look out for if you really have to do this? Because nowadays, even the fathers have paternity leave as well. So they are working hand in hand.
Well, I think what we should do in this circumstance is to ensure that if we can't help it, our children are given to a better hand, good hand, so that because when you talk about going to breastfeed, it depends on where you work. It depends on the available services around you there. If you are working at Federal Secretariat, I don't know how many daycare that are there, that you leave your work or your office to go and breastfeed for how many hours? I mean, except you have to transport yourself to where you go and breastfeed and come back. It will affect your job. So all we need to do is to get good hands where we can keep the children, and then the government also should look into it and see how either to increase the maternity leave of nursing mothers to make sure that the children, are not left to suffer because of the job and all that, or maybe within that period, they are allowed to come to the office with their children, and provide a place close to the office, and get some nannies to take care of
that is also children. An alternative that other women explore. Okay, thank you, Ambassador Charles. Now let's look at this feature from Abuja that is talking about the quality of teachers, perhaps with regard to what they get as a monthly stipend.
Funding is the biggest problem confronting the Nigerian education system. The percentage of the budget allocated to education annually is abysmally low. The new salary structure is expected to make the least paid teacher in the public service to earn between 150,000 naira and 300,000 naira monthly.
By what? Everybody clap for him.
Nigerian teachers looking forward to enjoying the new structure have to wait much longer as bureaucracy and paucity of funds have stalled the implementation.
If you look at the teachers at the federal level, that is FCT inclusive, one can say that the salary is reasonable because we are operating the federal salary structure. It is when you get to the states that some states, salary structures are not anything to talk about. So in that case, you find out that teachers are not properly or adequately remunerated. But having said that, I want to tell you that there is no amount of salary that will be paid to a teacher that will be commensurate to what a teacher does. Ordinarily, teacher is supposed to be properly paid so that he doesn't have time to do some other menial jobs to augment his salary. One cannot say that, categorically, that maybe because teachers are not properly paid, that is why their performances are very, very low. I wouldn't agree, because in the 90s, when I was a full classroom teacher, salaries were old salary for 3, 4, 5 months, even here in the Federal Capital Territory. And we're still doing our best because we had the passion to teach. So if somebody says, because he's not properly being paid, that is why he's not teaching very well, then I think that will not be good enough.
Parents now blame poor salaries paid to teachers for the low standard of primary and secondary education, among other factors, which include adequate training.
There are 2 basic training programs for teachers. We have pre-service training, and then we now have in-service training. Pre-service, that is, you go to a college of education or a university, you spend 2, 3, or 4 years. You come out with a certificate, either NC or BEd, degree certificate. As a trained teacher, you come out. Now, after that, when you now come, you have in-service training. This service training is in form of workshops, seminars, and so on and so forth. Now, government, I know very well that there is that provision for training every year. But what is always provided in the budget is not enough. The training programs for teachers are grossly inadequate. Each teacher should be able to make provision for his own personal training too. Take, for instance, the ICT. There is no way government can make provision for all the ICT program, computer program that you need. There are a lot of, other skills, other technicalities that you need to do. So a typical teacher does not necessarily need to wait for, a formal training program before he or she equips himself with that. So once you are a properly trained teacher, you know that one of those things that is compulsory, that you must keep learning. You must keep training yourself. I know before I left, I used to know that for you to even qualify to be promoted, at least you must have attended at least every year, at least 2 training.
Teachers used to hold the highest social status in Nigeria, but today the status quo seems to have altered.
Interesting one there. Nowadays, our children spend a lot more time in school than they do at home. We get to see them only at the weekend most of the time. 6 to 8 hours in school, Monday to Friday. So the quality of the teachers who impart knowledge to them is very critical. Ambassador Charles, tell us, what is the quality of teachers we have in private schools these days? Because private schools oftentimes are more expensive than public schools. So parents are paying their way. Is it impacting on the quality of teachers that we have in private schools?
Well, I think, to be honest, generally, the qualities of teachers we have in this country cannot be said to be good. But in private schools, we have good teachers. You must employ good quality teacher that will help you build the school, grow the school, and make sure that the children are given the best, because what you're giving to the children by implication is to the parents, because the parents are paying, just as you rightly said, and they want quality for their money. So private schools, because of that, try to employ teachers that can deliver, teachers that are qualified by the standard of the teachers we have in Nigeria, because it is the same thing we get from teachers' education that is in a mess. Those that, teachers in institutions or education or training schools these days are nothing to write home about. What we do in the private sector is to ensure that we train and retrain, expose them to workshops, to seminars, so that they will understand the state of the art in teaching and in guiding the children. Because education is not teaching the teacher what to teach. It's teaching the teacher how to teach. You understand? And in this 21st century, you must have teachers who do not think for the children, but help the children to think. Do you understand? So all this you can't get in the colleges of education of these days, because even the lecturers and all that in the university, those people we employ are the people from the same university that they spend two years to be graduates. The remaining 2 years or 3 years are spent at home, because of strikes, because of non-payment of salaries and all that.
There's a lot going on.
A lot going on there, yes, because the government itself is not helping matters.
But can we look at the character of our children that are producing in private schools? Because when you even graduate from the highest level, which is the degree program, they will say you have fulfilled what the requisite requirements in character and learning. How are you building the character of young children in private institutions?
Let me tell you that in private institutions, we are more concerned about the character of the children we bring up. Because we don't have what it takes to be fighting and calling police or doing all manner of things. We try to teach them how to behave, how to conduct themselves. We counsel them. We have gender assembly where we counsel the female students. Maybe like in my own school every Wednesday, we have gender assembly. You have the
guidance
male.
and counselor.
We have guidance and counselor. That helps. If we observe certain behavior, attitude, or character in a child, maybe is being withdrawn. It's not behaving well, we ask the counselor to find out what exactly is the problem. Could be problem from the home, could be problem from anywhere, or peer group influence or whatever. So we make sure that they have that affection.
We also know that as a parent, putting your child in a private school necessitates that you pay more. We pay more. So it should impact the teaching quality. That is the stipend that the teachers take home at the end of the month. Is it reflecting there? Are teachers in private schools well paid? Are they smiling home per month?
Well, it depends on what you mean by stipend. It depends on individual private schools. There are schools that charge, as they see, the charges in private schools are not uniformed. It depends on your standard, it depends on your investment, it depends on your level. You understand? Now, if you have a school where you have invested heavily, you've taken loans and all the work, you must make sure that your teachers are well paid. Do you understand? So that they can give you the best. And the parents will appreciate what you're doing by what they are paying too. So, but you cannot say a school that is collecting 5,000 per term
Will be
able to pay the teachers well. Any teacher going there, of course, knows. And of course, the level of teachers they will employ will be the ones that will be able to accept that little stipend.
Okay.
So,
but let me ask you, Ambassador Charles, before we wrap up, this is our final comment. How important is it to ensure that teachers are well paid? How will it reflect on the quality of the students that come out of that institution?
Let me tell you that paying teachers very heavily does not translate to...
Not heavily, well paid.
Okay.
Let what they take home be commensurate with the times. Let it be valuable for them so that all the time they spend in schools teaching, impacting knowledge of the leaders of tomorrow is worth their while. That they don't go home to start explaining and having financial challenges.
Well, the only thing we can do in that aspect is to ensure that, like in the private school.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yes, in the private school. Make sure that you don't take too much of what you realize to yourself. Do you understand? Investing in the teachers is the most important thing. And it makes them motivating them by paying them what will sustain them, at least to take care of their family and pay also their children's school fees and do other things, will not only help them alone, but it will help the school and help the quality of their input to your school. So it's simple, and it is something that benefits every private school. If you pay your teachers well, you can control them, you can tell them what to do, and they will do it with joy. Whatever you say, oh, let's do this, they will buy into your vision. They want to ensure that the school grows. They grow the school. It's advantageous to us, the private schools.
Okay. We wish you well. And as a former national vice president of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools, we know that you take this message and let it continue to resound in the ears of your colleagues who are also running private schools in the FCT. Ambassador Charles Omekwe, we want to thank you for coming on Weekend Deal today.
And let me say
we
this.
We need to go quickly.
Yes, let me say this. The government should minimize the level of taxes imposed on private schools, because you might think that these private schools are making fantastic money, but you don't know it's going into taxation, going into this. Every government agencies on private school wanting to get this and get that, and because of that, and the loan you take from the bank, it's not it's not a single digit interest. It's so much so that if you consider all these things, you think paying your teacher is spending much money. That is one of the problems.
Okay.
So if government can help support
Because
private schools,
okay.
we're talking about a system that has collapsed, especially the education system.
Okay.
We want the government to ensure that
to look into the
yes,
amount of taxes,
yes,
and
multiple
monies
taxation.
collected.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
We want to thank you, Ambassador Charles Omekwe, former National Vice President of NAPS and proprietor, High Grade International School, Mararaba.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure. And
You're watching Weekend Deal. It's time to see what Ijoma Ona put together. She's talking about private schools. Are they producing better students? Ijoma, what did your investigation reveal?
Everybody touch your head. Are you touching your head? Yes, touch your head. Now this is our what? Head.
The World Bank, in a report titled Education and Health Services in Nigeria, recently disclosed that private schools in Nigeria outperformed public schools across all indicators, with a notable distinction in their management of human resources. This factors in the concern of the quality of teachers, school curriculum, and treatment of the curriculum to impact knowledge in pupils.
In private school, teachers are meant to cover the scheme twice before the end of the term. You cover it properly, you do what you call revision for 1 week. You cover it, do your revision, evaluate the students, then teach them where they do not understand. We do what we call pairing of students in private schools. We have groups in each class. Another one is environment in private schools. Everything they needed are provided and they are in use. Like here, we are in the agric lab. Each science subjects have their own lab here. And there are teachers stationed to take care of the lab and teach the students well. They do their practicals, you see it real, not alternative. They work it out with the teachers and it's done perfectly.
There are many impending discussions about the legality, standards, and compliance issues about some of these schools. But let's look at the quality of education in the privately owned primary and secondary schools in Nigeria, vis-a-vis the public-owned schools. First, the quality of learning.
In the private school, not all private schools, the devoted private schools, mainly faith-based schools, the children produced there are far better than those in the public school. Reasons are the teachers are devoted, committed, the proprietors make sure that the teachers are there in the classes, they supervise the children's work to make sure that the teachers are up to date. In the public schools, though they have qualified teachers, but some of the teachers are not there. Some of them are not committed with their work. And the children are even many. There are more in classes.
You don't teach more than your strength for good outputs. Why in government schools? The number there is another problem. The teachers tend to go around. I see them exhausted. And for that very reason, it is not easy for them. I have been there once. When you come to school in the morning, you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And each of these classes, they have up to 50, 60 children.
Many Nigerian parents cannot afford private schools, and yet their children deserve quality education. Therefore, government should strengthen the monitoring and evaluation arm of the education sector to ensure quality and standard of learning.
You're watching Weekend Deal. Yes, those who organize, coordinate, and invest in private schools say that the quality of the students who emerge are better. That's their opinion. We'll continue to examine this issue, but for now, we'll take a break. We'll be back. Please continue to send in your messages. It's Weekend Deal, and there's a new language policy which is supposed to impact positively on our children on education. Let's go to Benin and find out more.
Imagine mathematics, English, civic, basic science, and other subjects used as a medium of instruction in indigenous Edo languages. Recent accounts estimate Edo to have over 12 major languages, not to mention several others.
In my state, for instance, we have several languages and dialects. And some of these dialects or languages don't yet have a robust written materials that can be used to teach. Or even the teachers themselves are not fluent in the mother tongue.
What plans does the Edo government have to implement the federal government's new national language policy, using indigenous Edo languages as a compulsory medium of instruction for primary schools?
Right now we teach Edo language in our schools, but we want to improve on it, strengthen the quality.
If a state like Edo decides to have a state policy on early reading, every child who has learned to read effectively in their mother tongue or in the language of immediate environment has a better chance to start in life when they get into secondary school.
It's a very good idea. It's a welcome idea. It's not something you can implement immediately. All we can implement immediately is to say, well, the immediate language should be taught in all the schools in each state.
Authorities say the new policy can only be implemented if the government develops instructional materials and train qualified teachers, among other measures.
We are actually going to be calling for a language workshop soon, inviting people, experts from our universities and tertiary institutions who are language experts in the various languages and dialects in Edo State.
The development of the teachers who are going to be the trainers that they should be talking about right now.
Whereas some pupils and school administrators are excited about the new policy, others express their concern.
It's going to cause problem for the teachers as well, because not all teachers are Edo language teachers.
It will feel nice, but some students that are not Edo, they may not understand. So the teacher has to say some in English language, because it's not everybody in the school that is Edo.
It will be great, nice, but some other students may not understand the use of Edo. They may not understand that Edo is different than English.
I cannot speak my dialect because I wasn't taught my dialect.
Many insist that while the insemination of a policy may promote cultural awareness, like two sides of the same coin, it may also be a challenge.
For languages like Wazobia, it's a lot easier to implement. Other more minority languages in the country, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But doesn't mean it cannot be done. It can. Where there is a will, there is a way.
For us to be able to have teachers who will teach mathematics, English, teach everything in Edo, we must train teachers for that purpose.
Overall, respondents say the new language policy will go a long way in fostering the nation's unity in diversity.
The new language policy sounds very interesting. I'm excited about it, and even more excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Mesuna Yaya, Assistant Director Languages, Secondary Education Board, Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Dr. Mesuna, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Thelma.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you so very much.
The language policy is exciting and excitable, so our children can learn different languages and it can foster unity. But give us your thoughts on this.
In the first place, we have been missing a lot of things as Nigerians. Take, for example, many children, particularly those who are living in cosmopolitan towns, hardly speak their mother tongues. And this is a kind of indirect disgrace. It is very difficult. Why? Because of the result of what the missionary schools did then, when the foreigners told them there should be nothing like vernacular. What do you mean by vernacular? So this is why we're having the problem. Instead of realizing right then, it is now we're realizing that our own languages are very, very important. Because when children learn in their mother tongues, they understand better than, if you look at in agricultural science, for example, there are a lot of botanical names that children will have to suffer before they are able to cram. And when they cram, by the time they finish writing the exam, they are forgotten. If were it to be in their mother tongue, it would have sunk down into their brains.
So we're going beyond their own mother tongue now. We're saying learn someone else's mother tongue and then learn yours.
Yes.
Because we're learning now that education is beyond knowledge. It's also building character. And unity can foster character. What do you think? When we now realize that we are one, it can start from the education system.
One good thing that is very common is that by the time you understand some others' languages, one, you are loved, you are accepted, then you mingle with them, then it brings unity. But where you are speaking a language I don't understand, I feel perhaps you are discussing me in a negative way. So that may create a kind of hatred into my own heart.
Animosity.
But now that federal government is trying to introduce this, one, it will foster on unity, cooperation, in having deep interest in learning, and so on and so forth. So it's a very good and welcome idea as the government is trying to do this.
I want to even attend that class, and I'm sure many of my colleagues are also interested. Let's go learn the other languages of our colleagues so we can mingle together, do things together, build Nigeria together, definitely.
Yes, exactly.
But let's look at education now. We're talking about private schools, public schools. Many say that because the private schools are coming on board, they are emerging, they're coming out massively, and they will continue to come up, that we won't say government, but governance is acting in a complacent way with regard to public schools. Now, the way it is, it does seem as though the standard is dropping. Is it or isn't it?
It isn't in a treaty.
The public
Why?
schools?
Because yes, especially or particularly, I can boldly talk about Abuja FCT schools.
Okay.
I do tell people, and I'm going to repeat here, that the quality of education we have here in FCT schools, hardly you will find same in most schools in other states. Two, the quality of teachers you have. In fact, in our secondary schools, you don't have a teacher who has less than first degree. Less than first degree. Where you have less than first degree, that's NTA, they're in primary schools. Anything less than NTA, you can't find them in primary schools. Now, that is one.
Of the student.
Two, then the quality of teachers now get transferred into students. If you look at our WAEC results, in most schools, we discover that they are of high standard. Then we couple with the fact that government is always at it. For example, in FCT schools, before the end of a term, that's 3-4 months, you have inspectors coming in and out. In fact, there are occasions where you have 3 different inspector teams from different areas meeting a particular school in a day.
So there are checks and balances.
A lot of checks and balances.
But let us, yesterday we spoke with Honorable Mohammed Usman, the former Commissioner for Education in Kaduna and a former Honorable Member of the National Assembly. He talked about students numbering up to 100 in classrooms. Is that happening in the FCT? Primary, secondary?
It happens, but not too rampant. Why? Because government has been trying. I know when water overflows, definitely to people who are watching from outside the world.
Tell us what you mean by when water overflows.
That means government is trying, but still has a lot to do. Because if you look at the generation we are having now, a lot of children are coming up, being enrolled in schools. And meanwhile, government also tries in order to provide the necessary infrastructure. But you can't afford this because of, policy. In the sense that a budget has to be defended and nothing can be done unless budget is being defended. Then government will now take up, education policy will now take up from where they have. So where budget has not been allocated, there's nothing that sector can do.
Education is the bedrock of every nation. And we are building leaders of tomorrow. And the private schools are emerging. And the public schools were there before them. We did know that children would come up. We are seeing them. We're birthing them. We're doing census about them. They are growing. Why are we not making necessary adjustments?
Well, education truly is underfunded. And I'll give you an example that really accumulates into this problem. Some community may stand at it and may be requesting for a school within the environment when the policy, the budget has not been made. In order to attend to that, something else will have to happen first. For example, they use primary school. If it's the second school they want, they use primary to take off. And then when the budget is ready, then they now stand on their feet. Meanwhile, government still needs to do a lot about population. That is fact. To reduce the population we have in classes. And I will tell you, frankly speaking, last 2 weeks, my director and I, we went for an inspection in a particular school here in Abuja. He discovered some of the problems there, and then he told them next week they should expect something to be done where population of those students will reduce from their classes in order to establish other classes. The following day we went to another school, the same thing, and he has spent, and let me tell you, point blank, he has started. Quote me right, he has started.
Who is that person you named, sir? So we can applaud him and laud him.
We call him our director and social secretary, Ladan.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Very good. It's good to take action promptly.
Yes.
You know what we learned yesterday? That when teachers go to a class numbering over 100 students, they are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They cannot pass on the requisite information. That means knowledge for that day, that term, is defeated.
Even on teachers.
I also learned that some of the students sit on the floor. Is that also happening here?
It's happening in some areas. It's happening.
We need to address it.
Of course.
So those inspectors who are going to provide those checks and balances need to take the information to those who should know.
You are talking to me directly. We have been doing that.
You have been?
Yes.
Have there been changes?
Hopefully this time around, there shall be sporadical changes. Quote me.
Based on what we also learned, there's the requisite percentage of the annual budget of a country that should be geared towards education, and that we're about 87% below what has been agreed. Who is addressing that? Who is taking a look at that?
The government herself will speak better on that.
Okay, great. Okay, so what do you want to share with us now about languages beyond the policy that we already have on ground?
Yes, I am of the opinion, and I really support fully, because without using our mother tongue, we'll be missing a lot of things. But when we start, we discover that children better learn than ever. 2, it will foster unity. I am repeating, it will bring a lot of unity.
Definitely.
Yes, in schools, what you see is a group that speaks a particular language will always be together. Then
Even
in schools, yes, discerning other students. I'm a teacher, right from onset, from teachers college up to today. I am a teacher, so I have gotten a lot of experience. But now, if this starts, languages will be cross-pollinated. People will learn other people's language, and it will foster unity, and it will erase some ideologies about which we have
myths, negative myths.
Yeah, exactly.
That some children have. They've inherited from home, their grandparents, their neighbors, negative things that have not been proven and have no atom of truth. Let's take a few messages and then we'll come talk about history. History was removed at some point.
As a subject?
Yeah, as a subject. Aliu Zizu is always sending us messages and experiences. We thank you. He's from Makadi, Benue State. He says a very educative program indeed. Aliu, tell us what is happening in Makadi. Give us a direct experience that we can talk about. Sani Kazim from Kwara State says that the Constitution may be the problem. He said if the Constitution can be looked at so that all members of the House and all members of the Senate, the National Assembly, all their children attend school in Nigeria, both primary and secondary, that the level of education will definitely improve. Sani Kazim is reaching us from Kwara State in Nigeria. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I will take that of Sani. Sani has spoken the right word. You see, when you are into something, you want to develop it. You want progress. You want everything that will make that thing to go further, not backwards.
Chuks Undon from River State says that many Nigerians go to school to the extent they have first degree, master's degree, PhD. He said, but many Nigerians are not educated. So how can we differentiate between going to school and being educated? What separates those who are educated and those who are not? Is it correct?
Summarily, going to school is to go and learn something. Then being educated is to imply and apply what you have learned. Many go to school, but they're not applying.
Interesting.
Simply put, somebody who has gotten maybe his PhD or master's degree or first degree, he drives and beats traffic. Knowledge has not passed into such
No character.
No character.
No patriotism. Exactly. But before we wrap up, tell us about the history. History was removed. History has been brought back. Why then? Why now?
Why then? For some reasons being put up by some others, they said historians, that's those who have read history, they have no very many places to work. True and false. True and false. True in the sense that they ought to have been working in areas like a museum, what is it called? Parks. But what I will advise government to do is to marry history with international relations studies. If they do, a lot of doors will open. Because there abroad, they have provisions for this. 1, 2. People believe that history, what do we need history for? Although that reason to me is not genuine. For a single person who does not know his history, another person will maneuver the history for him.
Indeed.
Number 3, many don't want to read history again because they believe you read history, you are going to certainly, definitely end up in classroom. And many people run away from classrooms.
They don't want to teach.
They don't want to teach, even though we are still there and forever we are. Number 4, if they remain in history, then they believe that if job comes not, what will be their own take?
If what comes?
If jobs come not, that means they don't get, if they are unemployed, what will they do?
What will they do?
Yes, in order to raise
they need to
their
get
own
skills,
family.
other
But
skills.
now that is coming, there are a lot of advantages. Some people are planning wars in their own, with their own mouthpiece. But what they have failed to realize is this: you only know the family you have come from through your own father, but your great grandfather, it might not be what you have thought of. For example, somebody's great grandfather might come from Enugu. The father must have come from Abuja, for example, the great grandfather. Then the father might come from Kwara State. I am telling you practically what is applicable. So by the time you know this history, yes, when you know this history, then it will create a lot of love and unity. That okay, we are one.
Education really is key, the bedrock to build a great nation as such as ours. I want to thank you, Dr. Mesuna Yaya.
Thank you very much, Thelma.
Assistant Director, Languages, Secondary Education Board, FCT. It's been great learning from you.
Thank you so
brisk,
much.
you're swift, you're delivering.
Thank you very much.
We wish you well.
Please
continue to inspect those schools and take swift and
one of
positive
these days I will invite you
decisions.
so that we'll go together.
We'd love to come, especially and partake of the language classes.
Okay.
We want to really, really learn.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on Weekend Deal.
Thank you very much.
Continue to pursue progress and development for our children. Well, Susan also has been doing some research and analysis. Susan, what did you find?
One of the most powerful weapons you can use to change the world is education. In an attempt to build a child's character and intellectual capability, parents begin to source for schools for their worlds to have a better and qualitative means of education. However, most public schools in Nigeria have class of over 50 pupils with just a teacher, whereas in private schools, the story is different.
There are things that makes private schools more unique than that of government. Number one is the security aspect of it. When you come to that of the government, there's high level of insecurity, especially in the student cadre. Then when you come to the private, the security of the children is their paramount care.
Private school creates an enabling environment where the learners, we don't educate the learners only academically, but we educate them intellectually, emotionally. It's an all-round education that we give to them. And not just that, we create a serene and a conducive environment for learning, for the learners, where parents can feel assured that, okay, my child is in the school, I have no cause for alarm.
You cannot even find a public nursery school. I don't think there's anyone. They start from primary, 6. So what about pre-primary care, nursery? So these people provide these services, and by the time you are with them, you tend to just migrate to the next one, and like that, and that's how it progresses.
Studies have shown that parents have transferred their children from public to private schools based on their perception of public schools. Consequently, this has made some parents to have a second thought in enrolling their children in public schools. Despite the outrageous school fees in some private schools, most parents still prefer to send their works to private schools.
There's an improvement generally. They have more experienced teachers. You find out the primary school teacher has been teaching for like 20, 30, is very, very experienced, but not motivated. You understand? So if the infrastructure and the motivation comes in, I think they are better than, they stand a chance to be better than most of these private schools.
Why the school fee is high is that we hire quality staffs that can give a positive result to our parents. And to get a quality staff, well-trained teachers, you need to pay them well to retain and maintain them. It's one of the reasons why, too, the school fees is high.
Definitely, they must get a private school that they can afford, because they all don't charge the same rates, and yet they still give quality education. So I will encourage them, because in the private school, they will actually get value for their money. No matter how difficult it is for that money, whatever they are paying, they get value for it.
Quality education is necessary for both human and societal development. Therefore, if we expect transformation in our political, social, and economic value, we must pay attention to quality education at all levels.
Quality education at all levels for transformation of our society and norms. We'll take a few messages before we wrap up the show. We appreciate them coming in. Basharu from Kaduna says, I'm not against private schools, but the proprietors should not be giving negative criticism of public schools, as almost all of them benefited from public schools to the extent that they were able to open their own schools. He said it's also not true that public schools employ unqualified teachers. He says you don't get employed by the education ministry unless you have the minimum certificate. It says from time memorial up till now, the public schools set the standards. Education of our children is a collective arrangement, a collective progressive developmental practice. The parents, the teachers, the neighborhood, the society, it's our duty and collective responsibility to ensure that any child around us gets the best positive impact at every stage, every time. We can do it together, especially with this introduction of the language policy. When our children learn other languages, they come to appreciate, respect, trust, and love everyone in their environment. And together, we'll continue to build this great country called Nigeria. It's a wrap from us here on Weekend. We thank you for being a part of the program. From all of us here, is wishing you a great week. And make sure you impact everyone around you positively. Bye-bye.